Okay, part one, we're going to learn how to properly base coat a model. So for this one, I'm actually going to be using a Khador Warjack arm piece here, and we're going to be going with a red. So when you first are base coating a model, you want to get what's called a base coat. And when you're doing this, going here, I'm going to go with Citadel Mephiston Red as a base coat. Now, you could also use something like Scale 75, like Blood Red, or even Army Painter Warpaint's Pure Red. Now, if you notice, they are a little bit different color-wise. I believe the Scale 75 is a little bit darker. The Mephiston Red actually will dry a little bit darker than what it looks like. And the Pure Red actually pretty much stays pretty much the same. So going from there, we're going to stick with the Citadel Mephiston Red for this, because a lot of people use Citadel paints. Now, when you are doing this, you're going to notice that the paint is very, very thick. You never want to actually take paint straight from the pot onto the model, especially the base paint. The reason why you don't want to do that is because if you have too thick of a paint, you actually will see brush strokes in the paint. So for this, we're going to use the back of the brush like this, and we're going to get a little bit of the paint out. I'm going to put it here on a tile that I have for painting, just like so. And I'm going to get a little bit of water, probably one drop should do it for this. And you just want it to make it not super runny, but you just want to be able to make it so that way it will move around on the model pretty easily, nice and smooth. Okay, and I'm kind of testing it here on my thumb. Yeah, and that looks about right. Alright, so now if you notice, when I get paint on the brush here, I'm only going part way up the bristles. I'm not getting my entire model, not my entire brush just completely saturated with the paint. It's because you don't want to get any paint up in the ferrule right here. So we're just going to keep the paint on just the edge. We're going to get say most of it off there. So make sure it's not too much. It's kind of just the perfect amount. Now, I'm not super worried about being super neat at the moment, because this is being the base paint. We need to just get the color on. So I'm going to go and get this color put all the way around. So make sure you guys can see it all right. Yep. Okay. I'm trying out a new setup. So with the webcam here while I'm painting, so I can explain everything. But at the same time, if you see me looking over to my sides, because I'm watching it on my monitor that I have it set up over there. So making sure that everything is in view, and hopefully it works out. If you like it this way, let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to continue to do it this way. So like I said, this video is going to be for pretty much the hobby basics part 2. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on painting the models, making sure that you have a good base coat, good layering, as well as washes, how to do small detail, and so forth. It's actually taken me a couple days to figure out exactly how I was going to do this video, because I had a couple false starts, and at one point I actually painted a couple models on camera and explained everything that I'm doing here, and probably filmed about good 2 hours worth of footage, only to lose it all in post-production. I just could not get the audio to sync up, because I didn't have the little cam link that I have now that allows me to record my audio and footage at the same time. And it was a real pain in the arse to sync everything up. So this is take 2 to say on that, and hopefully I ironed out all the bugs, and hopefully this will make it a little bit easier. I know my webcam is a little dark than normal, but I'm actually trying to work with a little bit of light versus the blinding main light that I have, because I'm trying to keep a little bit more focus on exactly what the model is doing here. Now, the good thing about these base paints is they actually dry pretty quickly. Like my original coat is pretty much already dried. So when I do base coating, especially around like vehicles and large surface areas like this, there's actually a technique that I use that I find to help me quite a bit. And it also really helps with eliminating brush strokes. Okay, and what I do is I want to show you. I'm going to put this off to the side real quick and let that dry. Now, if I'm painting, for instance, this area on my tile, okay, my first coat, I'm going to keep everything going horizontal. Alright, just like this. So that way, if there was any brush strokes or anything like that, they would actually dry in a line going this way. Okay. Once this is completely dry, my second coat, because you always want to do at least two thin coats of paint. I'm actually going to go next time. I'm going to go vertical, like this. Now, mind you, you can still see the little bit of brush strokes. It's because the original paint level was not dried all the way. But for shits and giggles, I'm just showing you this way. Now, when the original base color was dried from the horizontal, and now the vertical coat is now drying, they're going to layer upon each other, almost like a crisscross, and it's actually going to eliminate brush strokes. So when they dry, it's actually going to look like a one solid clear coat. Alright, I'm actually going to paint the back of this model because I'm going to show this. This is going to be a really good one for the washes. And the thing about, like, again, with the base coating, you don't have to be particularly neat. I mean, we want to be mindful of where you're putting paint, because I mean, you're obviously going to have to repaint over areas that you're covering later on. But for this, I actually planned on his coat being red, so I don't like wasting paint. So we're just going to go ahead and get this guy covered up. Now, the other thing you want to keep in mind is your primer or base color that you have. For instance, these models were primed black. And when you prime a model black, your base color is going to be darker than normal, because the color from the primer is essentially going to make its way back through the layer of paint. So if you want a really bright red, or you're trying to highlight models to get really bright highlights, like up to orange, yellow, and things like that, it would really behoove you to go all the way up to a white primer, or at the very least a light gray primer. Some people like to use like a Stynylrez primer for my airbrush, and that's perfectly fine. Those work really well. Or you can use Rattle Can, like GW Corax White, I believe, as well as the black, like Chaos Black type primer from Games Workshop as well. And there's other colors from like Vallejo, like German Army Painter Green or Yellow. Yeah, they come in all sorts of colors. But just be aware that whatever color you're using is going to have an effect on the base layer and layer paints that you're using later on. Alright, so washing off my brush. You always want to make sure you want to wash off your brushes after each application of paint that you're doing. Help keeps your brush nice and moist, as well as get nice and clean. Alright, we're going to go back to this guy right here. See if you can see this a little bit better in the color here. So you can see by doing 2 coats of paint, I've gotten a pretty nice solid color of red going through that's pretty opaque. So you don't see splotches coming through, you don't see a little bit of black showing through. And that's a good thing about the base colors from Games Workshop, is they're very good at covering up over black black primer. Okay. So now we're actually going to move on to the next color, and this is what we call a layer paint. Okay, and layer paint is essentially just that. It's the next layer up. Now you could do this 2 ways. You could either take, for instance, I'm going to take Citadel Layer Wild Rider Red. Now, as you can see, I don't know if you can show this really up, but it's almost like an orange to the red. All right, now this is going to dry a little bit darker than what it shows here while it's wet. But I don't particularly want the color to be that bright of an orange. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a little bit of this Mephiston Red, just a real tiny bit, like that much, and I'm going to mix it just like this into the orange. Okay. Don't be afraid to actually mix your paints and to experiment with colors, because yeah, you can actually find some pretty cool stuff that happens. I'm going to put a little bit more orange in there just to lighten it up a bit. And that's actually a pretty good solid color right there. Now, the added benefit of doing it this way is you're going to get the coverage layer and the opaqueness from the Mephiston Red, the base paint, with the lighter color of the Wild Rider Red. Now, when you are painting something like this, you want to, the best way I can explain this would be something along the lines of coverage percentage. Okay, so whereas we did this entire area, we'll call it 100% of the Mephiston Red, we're only going to do about 90% of the Wild Rider Red. Now, on regular like figurine miniatures, like the characters, you want to do these as, like, I don't want to say highlights, but in areas where light would be shining. But since this is like an armor panel, there's going to be a lot of light shining on these armor panels. So we're going to go, and we're just going to real lightly. Remember what I was saying earlier about going one direction, not the band, but the actual direction of the paint. You want to go a single way, just like this. Okay. Try not to mess with it too much while it's drying, because you will move some of the paint around, and it just makes it harder to dry normally. Make sure you catch the edges. Now, if you get a little paint like this right here, oh, sorry. If you get a little bit of paint on the edge right here, don't worry about that. Just, we're going to be going over it anyways. I've been stocking up on some other supplies too for doing terrain. Now, because on one of the Facebook groups, the Warhammer discussion group that I'm in, I put up a poll and asked for types of terrain people wanted to see, and the overwhelming response was buildings. So I'm actually going to show you guys how to do some cool buildings on the cheap, and also as more advanced level ones as well. So there we go. To help dry this along a little bit quicker, you can also blow on these. And it really does help with the drawing speed and time. Now, going back to my third coat, let me get a little bit more water onto this. It's always better to do lighter coats, or I should say thinner coats, than thicker coats, because you can always add more thin coats. Alright. Now, last time I went horizontal, now I'm going to go the opposite direction. I'm actually going to do more of a vertical. And hopefully it will show up on the camera and you'll see how much of a difference it will actually make doing it this way. And just remember, the most important part about painting miniatures is, one, to relax. Find your what was it Happy Gilmore says, find your happy place, and just kind of concentrate, like lose yourself in the moment for what you're doing, and take your time. The only person that's ever going to rush you at doing this is you. So a lot of times, even myself included, I might be getting to the end of a project or a commission that I'm doing or working on, or whatever it is I'm doing, and you start getting a little impatient after spending, several or tens of hours working on a project. You're like, oh, I just want to finish this thing. If you get to that point, stop and take a break, because when you rush, mistakes happen, as well as your craftsmanship at what you're doing drops, and the whatever you're working on will reflect that. So remember, this hobby is supposed to be fun. Painting is supposed to be fun. If you're into that, it's not supposed to be a chore. So don't make it a chore. Like when I'm doing batch painting, where you paint multiple models at once, one of the things I like to do, if I'm painting, for instance, Space Marines, where I'm painting a group of them, like 10, it can be kind of boring after a while. After I'm done doing that, I'll reward myself with painting a model that I really want to paint, whether it's like a tank, a hero, or some type of, or even a different unit from a different army. So kind of, you also kind of want to mix it up sometimes, so you're not painting the same thing over and over and over. Alright, so I'm going to let that dry for a second. Clean our brush. So this weekend, sorry about that. This weekend I have a couple things planned. One of them is I'm going to be showing you guys how to strip miniatures. So for instance, if you buy a miniature off of like eBay and it is badly painted or is not in good condition, for instance, like this guy, I got to repair this model right here, but I'm going to strip this model, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that, and then how to properly prime models. And if I can find something to magnetize, I'm going to show you guys how to magnetize. Depending on what kind of magnets to use, the different sizes, and also some ideas for storage from what you can do to carry models around, especially if they're metal models. Some pretty neat things that we can do for that. All right. So this layer looks finished. So we're going to go on to a wash. Now with washes, there's different ways that you can do this. You can take, for instance, a black wash, especially if you're painting like a red. model like this, you can take a black wash, you can take a brownish black wash, like for instance a very, very popular Citadel Agrax Earthshade is a very good color for shading reds. It does, if you do it over the entire model, it will make it very kind of muddy looking, and you would have to go back over and clean it back up and do the things that you're doing. But in this case, I'm actually going to go the polar opposite, like opposite color of red is being blue, right? It's a contrast color of, it would make things pop, right, if things are going together. So when you put red next to blue, your eyes can't really focus on it, so it makes it stand out that much more. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of this purple tone, because purple has some blue in there and it's dark. This is very dark, and I'm going to show you guys how we can shade this model using this purple tone, and it's going to make it really pop and it's going to look really, really nice. All right, so especially if you're using these Army Painter quick shades, the washes, give it a good shake. Always, anything Army Painter, you want to give it a good shake. For these shades, for instance, you don't really need to dilute them. I mean, you can, but for this purpose, I'm not going to do that. All right, so I'm just going to get a little bit out. I'm going to get a detail brush. I'm actually not going to slather this model with this wash. Instead, I'm going to go through and I'm going to pick out a few little detail areas. So I'm going to bring it up here for you to see. So on these rivets, I'm just going to press and just let it pool just a little bit. If you get too much, feel free to use your brush to actually soak up the extra amount of wash. I call this like pinpoint detailing, and I tend to do this around every single rivet, which if you're not used to it can become very, very tedious. But I actually enjoy to do. I enjoy it this way. So this is what I like to do. So as you can see, sorry, I'm trying to keep it in view here. You're just going through each of the little models, or each of the little rivets here. Now if you notice, I'm not putting the wash all over the model. I'm just doing it in the areas where there would be natural shadows. Okay. Now this wash will dry a little bit darker and it will kind of blend in with the red. Just like this. There we go. And these washes, depending on how thick you're putting it on, the drying time can vary. There we go. Let's get a little bit more here. Almost done. If you guys have an idea, especially of like how to paint certain colors or anything like that, like if you want a mini series on how to paint blues or greens, things that go good with that, please feel free to shoot me a comment below and let me know if there's anything that you want to see me paint. I have a huge line of models I'm going to be going through, everything from Retribution of Sakrya to Trollbloods, Khador. I got some Krix and a couple other things as well, all for War Machine and Hordes. Now if you notice, what I'm doing here is I'm taking this wash and I'm just kind of feeding it into this crack and crevice. I'm trying not to get it over the entire area, but I just wanted to get it to where like dirt and things like that would naturally want to settle. I'm just trying to make that depth. The whole point of the wash is to add depth to the model in a controlled manner. Okay, there we go. All right, so that's actually not bad for getting some washes on there. Okay, you can already see the details starting to pop out here on the rivets, just like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make those rivets detail really pop out. So I'm going to take some Wild Rider Red. Now remember how we had diluted it first with the Mephiston Red? We had actually blended the two colors together to make a mix. Well, in this case, we're actually just going to take it straight orange. All right, just like so. I'm going to take this light brush again. In this case, I just want just a little bit of paint on my brush. I'm going to go back through each of those rivets, and I'm just going to touch just the very tip of the rivet with this orange color. Now, with the dark purple wash as the recess, and then the orange on the rivet, it's really gonna make it pop. Like, you're really gonna see each and every rivet really sticking out just because of the way the colors work. You are doing kind of a forced perspective. Essentially, you're creating like a miniature optical illusion. You're like, each one of these rivets that you're painting and putting that little wash in the paint of the rivet, you're essentially making that rivet go, hey, look at me. And it really will draw the eye to those rivets. Now, if you get a little bit of paint like on the actual model itself, that's fine. You can, it's actually, if you're quick enough, you can actually wipe it off the model, and you still be fine. Okay. All right. So I don't know if you can see it, but each one of those rivets are really starting to shine there. Makes it look really nice. Okay. So that is what I like to call spot detail, right? When you're working with rivets or you're doing things like that, it's a really neat way of very kind of quickly getting some details to show up. All right. Next thing we're going to do is called a highlight. Now, there are various forms of highlights. You can do things from like extreme highlights to more subtle highlights. It's really kind of, excuse me, your personal taste of what you want to do. So for this, going back to that orange color yet again, I'm going to put a little bit of water into this paint, and then I'm going to take a lighter color. So give me 1 second. I'm going to find a lighter color to go. I'm going to go with, I'm going to use Phoenix Flames Army Painter. Now this is obviously a golden yellow that I think will go well with the reddish orange that we're using. And again, giving it a good shake. Now I'm just going to put this right next to this color. I'm going to use my big brush right here to mix these two up, because I don't want to get any paint into the ferrule of this brush. Okay, let's get a little bit more yellow in there. That orange is pretty powerful. There we go. Nice yellow orange. Okay. Alright. So I'm going to go back to this sharp brush. All right, this is a Wargamer detail from Army Painter. So it's again a nice little tip on there. Now I'm actually going to use not the tip of the brush. I'm actually going to use the edge of the brush, and you'll see by what I mean. So by using on this, get a little bit of paint on here, I'm going to take the edge of the brush and I'm just going to literally not use the tip but just the edge. I'm going to run it along the edge of the model like so, just real light. And what this is going to do, it's going to deposit that paint onto just that edge, and it's going to give it a really nice bright highlight on that edge. Now, using where the light is essentially shining, that's where you want to do the highlights. So I'm not going to do highlights down here on these under the model. I'm only going to do up top, like right here. Because this is where I want to draw the attention for the model. So if somebody picks up the model, I want them to look here at the fists and be like, oh wow, check that out. I always try to paint everything that I do for like a wow factor, whether it's tabletop or higher quality or whatever it is I'm doing. I always want to make sure I try to like not just go past my expectations, but expectations of other people. So when I game or whatever, I put my models on the table, people are like, oh, whoa, check those out. Oh, that's just me. I like to do it that way. All right. So you don't really need a whole lot. Like less is more. Like you may actually not see it 100% because it's like a very transparent color. You may need to do like 2 coats. But by looking here, you can see the little line that's going across. It's very uniform, going across the red, just like this. And that's how you get what's called a highlight. And there we go. So this, we have covered the basics of painting, right? We have gone down the base coat, the layer paint, doing spot details, doing a wash, and then doing a highlight. Now this it would be perfectly acceptable and good for tabletop quality. All right. Once you get into multiple layers of more receding amount of color to doing what's called glazes, where it's essentially a wash of color that is very much diluted and watered down, and doing multiple, like several, even tens of several light, very, very, very diluted washes over a model, like to the point where it's barely seeing any color whatsoever on the model. But after like 10, 12, glazes over, then you start to see that other color starting to come through. That's more of a very, very time intensive, advanced technique, glazing and things like that. And we'll try to cover that much later on. Okay. But for the moment, this is going to be the tutorial for painting a tabletop standard miniature. All right. So I want to thank you guys for joining me on this. And yeah, if you like this, give me a thumbs up, share the video. I'm always trying to find more people to reach. And if you feel like, hey, you want to help me out, please feel free to visit my Patreon page that I have set up. I'll have the description. I'll have the link down in the description. And until next time, thank you and rock on, guys.